Hi, Crissy Spivey.
Hi, Leah C.
All right. Well, welcome to my online conversation series, which is called The Art of Online Learning. And it really is meant to just talk to all different kinds of people who are either experiencing something in online learning for the first time, or have been doing it for years, or are looking at it from a new light during this pandemic. And I thought of you when I started having this conversation series because you're an interesting case in lots of ways, but mainly in that you're a super experienced professional. You've been in the field of media for probably nearly 20 years, and yet you're teaching for the first time. Is that correct? It's the first time teaching. So,
Right.
you know, a lot of times new sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, just that I've done workshops, but it's very different than what I'm doing now, which is a class with a syllabus. And
Right. Yeah, a lot of times new teachers are like 22 or something, or just out of college. So you have all the confidence and the knowledge that you need, but are kind of coming at like teaching a course for the first time. So before we kind of get into like what might be coming up and how I might be able to help, just wanted you to have a chance to say kind of what your background is and what you're doing now. And then I'll kind of ask you about the course after that.
okay, well, thanks for having me. I'm very excited. Well, let's see. So my background. So as you know, we moved to New York weeks within each other in 2003.
Yeah.
And before moving here, I was in grad school for television and film. I really wanted to work in that industry. And I got my master's, and it was all exciting. And I worked in crime television for Court TV and doing production and working on forensic files. And then I worked at a nonprofit for 6 years, Breakthrough, which is a great organization based in New York and India, doing racial justice and immigration rights, and also doing women's rights and domestic violence in India. And then I've kind of bounced around in the big media world, like NBCUniversal, as well as doing working with Viacom, but now ViacomCBS, and running digital within their internal agencies, so working across the different brands.
Right. Gosh, when you say it all like that, it's amazing how much you've done. You and I have known each other before any of that happened.
I know. It's like, okay, we did it. We like had some really cool jobs.
yeah, exactly. And what are you doing now?
So most recently I was at ViacomCBS, and so now I've started my own shop called Daughters Collective, which I'm really excited about. It's a creative shop. We connect different brands with digital agencies, the thing is, we do a lot of different things with digital. That was my thinking going into it, because these media companies, even though they have lots of dollars, a lot of times there's few people within the media companies doing the things. So I know how the sauce gets made. So my major offering is connecting brands to digital agencies, because I know so many. I know how to do requests for proposals and briefing and what they need. So I do all of that liaising between the two, but also doing strategy, depending on what they need. So I help them come to the conclusions of what they need, and then introducing them to the different agencies that can help them get that done. But then also I do a lot of strategy it myself. So for example, if someone needs a digital strategy, or they don't know how to use certain platforms, I do social audits. I do audits of their website, of the community that they're trying to reach, and I make strategic recommendations as well. So it kind of depends. So it's sort of like, because Daughters Collective is new, I had one idea of what I would offer, but then a lot of people know me, and so they'll ask me if I can do different things, and so the offerings kind of end up growing, which is really exciting. So it's been an interesting journey, but I'm so happy because I now actually get to control more so the projects that I work on. I get to have a say in the teams that I'm putting together, as in the collective. So pulling in groups and pulling in women, largely women that I've worked with in the past, to produce these campaigns or whatever that we're doing. And I'm also teaching class at CUNY, I will say, that I'm excited about.
Yeah, what's the name of the class?
The class is called Topics and Perspectives in Emerging Media. So I'm really giving largely juniors and seniors an understanding of the digital agency industry. You know, and a lot of the students that I work with they're tech students, they're techies, they're gamers. So they'll know a lot about they're going into web development, app development, new technologies that aren't really new anymore, like AI and machine learning and things like that. But they're very entrenched in the building development and working at dev shops or being independent, but they don't necessarily know about the agency world. So I kind of break down what's an agency, what's a creative agency, what's a digital agency behind many of the brands that you know of or campaigns that you know of. And this is the structure, and this is the whole process.
Is this a new class? Like, are you creating this class?
It's not a new class, but I think my approach to it is new, that I have so much experience on the digital agency side. I'm not a professor, typically. I'm normally a professional.
You are now.
Yes, I am. They do call me Professor Spivey, which is very strange.
I'm going to start calling you that.
I find the email Crissy, and then I'm like, oh, I just undercut myself. It's fine.
Professor Spivey. And so, you know, what is like, is it a practical skills kind of course? Like, are there things that you want your students to kind of be able to do by the end of it? Or is it more like you want them to become familiar with the professional language and sort of current issues of the field right now?
My goal really is to make them aware of this industry. I just didn't know about it at all when I was coming out of school. And I don't think there has been great strides in making students aware of this industry. When I worked in television, we would have student tours come in and they would say, this is what it's like to work in television. And it's an old school industry, right? Television, everyone knows what television is. But the internet it's still new. It's still pretty new. And digital agencies actually are very new. Agencies like Mad Men, like that world, know of that, you know, big office, fancy outfits, bottles of liquor. Like it's Is
that not what your life is like?
No. It's very antiquated, but digital agencies and creative agencies are now molding and becoming one thing. Right. And I want them to know, one, what they are, and that they are very exciting and fun and profitable industries and places that they could work. Right. And I also want them to know, one, the different teams, how they're structured. And I want them to know the terminology, because I realize that I know so many different words. Even working in nonprofit and going into the agency side, I didn't really know what people were talking about. And so I feel like every class I'm giving them, these are the words that you should know. So when you go out into the world, they're not, none of this is new. They've at least heard of it before. And so they know where to look. So giving them that familiarity to the industry.
I should say that you are one of the people with whom I talk that frequently says words that I don't understand. Like kind of a lot of things related to digital agencies. And I'm like, I could ask about that, but I feel like maybe I should just take her course. So there's a real vocabulary component in a sense. Like it's almost like developing that professional language and awareness so that they not only can recognize what they're hearing, but then come off as professionals as soon as they step into a situation. Can you, for people who don't know, can you just briefly say what a digital agency is?
Sure. So a digital agency typically is a company that creates the digital assets for a campaign.
A campaign, like a brand campaign.
A brand campaign. So for example, say Coca-Cola needs a campaign. They actually just came out with a really great one. I actually think I sent you the video for it, for what's going on with COVID. And so a campaign could be, okay, we have a new flavor coming out. We want people to be able to feel like they're involved in the branding or something like that.
Yeah.
Come up with the creative concept, they'll come up with how that concept rolls out digitally. So they're having a video. Where does the video live? Does it live on the Coca-Cola site? Does it have partner affiliate sites that they're posting the video on? What's the social strategy? What's the hashtag? What are we asking audiences to do? So they come up with a lot of the creative, and they also come up with the execution, how it rolls out into the world on digital platforms.
Interesting. Okay. So, and an agency will work for a brand for about one campaign and then might be hired for another campaign, but it's all on a project basis.
Exactly. Unless you are an AOR, which is an agency.
See what I mean about talking to you?
Yes.
Sorry, an AOR is what?
An agency of record.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. But in general, brands hire digital agencies that fit the aesthetic and the theme of that campaign. So they can kind of choose based on the campaign that they're running.
Typically, a lot of the times, companies have creative very close to their vest, right? They hold them very, they want to have a lot of say, right? Because it is their brand. So for example, when working for media companies, a lot of the times our designers in-house would work with the external digital agency that we've hired to come up with the look and the feel, because a lot of times they just don't want to hand it all off.
Right.
So it ends up being a collaboration.
Right. Interesting. So, well, I have a few thoughts, but I'll save them. I should say I want to structure this so that I can get a sense of what you're doing, a sense of what this class is, and then I want to hear any challenges that have come up, and I can sort of give you anything I can to make this first experience teaching digitally, not only first experience teaching, having to do the whole thing digital in a global pandemic during an election season when there's plenty of distractions. I mean, what a crazy time to teach for the first time while you're in the first year of starting this amazing and successful new business.
And being a new mom.
Oh yes. Crissy is the mom of the most adorable child in the universe who has really cute girls. Woo! And it's very well dressed. I mean, it's kind of astounding.
Very sweet.
So tell me what the experience has been like so far to teach, and feel free to, describe anything about it that you want, but in that, tell me kind of any challenges that have come up. So I guess I'm interested in I understand your approach to the content, like what kind of content you're teaching. How are you doing the teaching? Like how is the week structured? What kinds of things do you do with the students, and how is that going? Like what might be going well? What struggles are coming up?
Let's see. So the class is all of the things above that you said. It is great, but it is also challenging. It's all on Zoom. So the major platforms that I'm using right now are Zoom and Slack.
Okay, they don't have like a learning management system where you post content like articles or videos, like assignments for the week?
They do, however, I don't love it, and I find that it's a bit fragmented.
Yeah.
In having all of the platforms. So
what is the platform that they use for?
OpenLab.
Okay.
Which I do think is great. However, for me, I think being a first-time professor adjunct, I'm trying to streamline it.
Yeah.
Because I could post the homework and articles in multiple places.
Yeah.
And it seemed like they weren't using it as much, OpenLab, as much as I would have liked. So I use Slack more often. So every week I post homework. And homework typically looks like I have all of the students listen to a podcast about the week upcoming, a few articles for reading research.
A podcast like that you find that's relevant. Okay. Right. Yeah. About the theme of the week that's happening. Yeah.
Exactly. And I also should say that the class is largely it's about digital agencies, but it's also about what digital agencies are doing during these times. So how are they attacking COVID? How are they working with Black Lives Matter or not?
Right.
How are they handling Me Too? Like,
Yeah.
are they doing campaigns? Are they dodging? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are they doing? So this is a digital agency, but also what are digital agencies doing during these times?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the podcast will be about, like, last week's class was about COVID
Mm-hmm.
and digital agencies. So looking at the different campaigns that digital agencies have done about COVID, if they've done anything yet, as well as a podcast about technology and COVID. So that's what the homework usually is: reading responses, and then I'll give them an assignment for them to do. And then
what kind of assignment?
The assignment can vary from, I will say that I'm a digital agency, I'm a client coming to them, and they have to come up with a creative concept for a campaign, and think about how that campaign rolls out across digital.
Cool.
Or I'll have them do reading responses. I'll have them research digital agencies.
Yeah.
And I have in class, typically students will lead the class through a podcast discussion. So I'll assign students to the podcast for the week and have them discuss.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
But I think the biggest challenge that I've had is that the class is about 3.5 hours long, 3 hours and 20 minutes to be exact. And making sure that they're engaged, because sometimes I'm not the first class of the day.
Right.
And that's a really long time online.
It's a really long time. Yeah.
For me and them.
Yeah.
And trying to find assignments that, one, keep them engaged, get them to talk to each other, get them to feel like they're really learning something. A lot of the cameras are off, which I understand.
Yeah.
On, and we can't really ask for them to turn them on.
Right.
So
yeah, that's tough.
That has been a challenge. I typically do like a 30 to 40 minute lecture, and I try to find a guest speaker, either someone that I've worked with in the past at an agency, like a developer, creative director, designer, writer, to talk about their work.
Right.
And I've tried to do everything to make it to those 3 hours. And we actually end up going over most of the time.
Have you considered like jumping jacks and, push up, like calisthenics midway through?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. Go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
No.
Feel free to do the Kamala Harris. I'm speaking. Yeah. I was very inspired by that lesson. Well, it sounds like your kind of background in creating digital assets really helps in teaching in some ways, because you're already coming at this from multiple angles and you're not afraid to use different kinds of media, and you're already kind of thinking about ways to apply the content immediately to professional and real life contexts, which not all new teachers would have that the instinct to do, like pulling podcasts in. And then having students listen to a podcast and then lead a discussion around that is a great way to bring like a student participation in a way that doesn't feel forced. Like it feels like somebody kind of has to own that and become the expert on that for the week. It's really smart. In terms of the 3 hours, I'm going to suggest something that's sort of maybe a broader shift. And I don't even know if it's a shift. It's maybe just like a proposal of a direction to take the course as it goes through the semester that might both make it easier for you to use that time well, and also provide a reason for the students to talk to each other more than just like, oh man, we have this time, we have to have a discussion. I'm really tired. This is my like 5th hour on Zoom for the day. I don't really feel like talking. So, one thing I learned in my time as a language teacher is when you want students to talk, you often have to create a reason for them to talk that's actually like so that they are like, oh, I have something to say and I have to say it for a particular reason, not like I should talk because that would be what a good student does. And the way to do this, one of the ways to do this is to kind of shift towards a project-based curriculum. And you're already doing it a little bit with your like applied situations that you're asking students to think about and reflect on and kind of put their brain in like a professional mindset. But I'm wondering if, and I don't know your like business or your field well enough to exactly know what this would be, but if there would be a project that they could be working towards all semester long that could kind of, that the class could culminate in them finishing this project, and each topic that you introduce could be part of, could contribute to their making of the project. So it's a little bit different from like when you and I were in college, which by the way, we were in college together, you know, where you'd like then write the paper at the end. This is like everything that you're learning contributes to an overall understanding that you're developing over the time that you're in the course. So for example, I'm going to just switch it to something I know maybe a little bit better. And I think you'll quickly be able to apply it. But say you are teaching a course on website development. And then you had different topics throughout the week on topics and pieces of content that were really important to learning how to develop a website. So each time the students learned something new, they would immediately have to consider how to apply that to the website that they are building for this, that will be due at the end of the semester. And it would be layered so that, you know, maybe first they have to think about the infrastructure and the layout and the user interface of it, and create a wireframe that they would sort of hand into you for review, and you would give feedback. And then that would be like weeks 1, 2, and 3, and they would then have a wireframe for how they were going to build that. And then they would have to choose a platform to build that website on, and they would have to review several and choose one, and then figure out how to lay out that infrastructure on that platform, and then they would present that to you for feedback, and so forth. So they would be building this project as they went along, rather than like trying to throw together something at the end and apply everything that they learned the whole semester.
Right.
So that's one way that it creates sort of like a journey or a direction for a class, and gives the class kind of a sense of purpose, as well as infusing like actual skill-based teaching and learning into the course. And the way that this connects to how to use the time well and how to get people to talk to each other is there's a few frameworks that would make it so that students might really need to work on this together. Like you might say, everybody's going to get like a thought partner, and maybe they're either working on their own thing or they're working on the same thing together, but they're required to both, you know, show each step of the way, each new thing they do, they're required to show it to that person, and that person's asked to give substantial feedback on what they're doing according to what you've been talking about and teaching that week. And then so they would exchange and give feedback on each other's work, or they would make it together and they would like actually be collaborating on the creation of this thing. And with that, say it's a duo, a partnership, you could also have so each person would have a partner, and each person might also have a small group, so that whatever that partner set is working on could also then show it to this other partner, and they could switch and maybe not give in-depth feedback, but glance at it, give a few thoughts. So not only are they getting the benefit of getting the feedback, but they're also getting the benefit of seeing more people's process, both seeing what they're doing well and what mistakes they're making. And that's part of like the practical aspect of the learning. And the way that this makes the 3.5 hours easier is that you don't have to lecture that whole time, or nobody had, it can become more of like a workshop. So you're talking a little bit, you're talking about the content of the week, the really cool stuff that they're going to focus on this week, and then you're explaining what they're working on. And then you're saying, all right, you know, we're going to get offline, but you are going to connect with your partner for 45 minutes, and this is work time for you. Like in that work time, work on this assignment, and you know, get as much done as you can. It's due on Sunday. We're going to meet again after 45 minutes, and people can ask any questions that have come up. If they're stuck, we can talk through that. You can ask, you know, if you have encountered any obstacles, we can deal with those. Talk for 15 minutes. Then you have another half an hour where maybe you put them in breakout groups in Zoom, and like those 4 groups of 4 meet, and they share what they've been working on. And then after that, the whole class meets again. And so you're kind of going in and out of like whole class, students in partnership, students in small group, and then you could end with the whole class, kind of you summarizing what you if possible, you could visit those groups We'd have to figure that out technologically.
Yeah.
You could sort of summarize what you'd seen, give some advice. So you're more like a coach, a guide, rather than like a chalk and talk teacher, which nobody wants that. Not you, you know, like not the people on Zoom for 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then at the very end of the course, whatever this project is, like the last 2 weeks can be them putting together like a really professional level video conference presentation of whatever they've created. And showing how they've integrated your feedback through the semester, their partners' feedback, their small groups feedback, and then they also possibly have something for a portfolio, you know? So it's like, if you can model it, if you can make it so that it is portfolio ready, then that's like actual real life motivation for them to do something cool and have it in their pocket. So yeah, what do you think?
No, that's really helpful. I think just it's been definitely a learning trying to figure out what, because they have because it's just it's a class that's different in their normal semester of labs and workshops, which is more on coding. Me also learning what they know and me figuring out, is this something that I feel like they're comfortable enough to go out and workshop? And that just means I need to make sure that I'm breaking down the lectures and making sure that it's digestible enough for them to go off into groups and do. And that's obviously my role and my responsibility in changing that. I do think that could be, and what I've been able to do somewhat, but I would like them to work on a project longer term rather than at the end.
Yeah, right.
It's just the semester is so long, and then are they going to be ready at the end? Because
and they'll be stressed, and it'll be the holidays, and they'll be really burnt out, and so they're going to be prouder of what they make if they're kind of developing it all semester.
Exactly.
Yeah, and in a way, it can help. It can. I mean, can make the planning a little bit more intense, because you're right. You have to think like, what are they really doing in that half an hour session with each other? What are they doing in that 45-minute session? Whatever. Like, you have to have like it written out so that they can refer to it and know what they're doing, what they should sort of have done by the end of that time.
Right.
But it also, that planning relieves so much stress when you're actually teaching, because then you're kind of more like a facilitator rather than like a lecturer who has to be in charge at every moment and is responsible for getting everybody involved. You like, I prepared this thing. You learners, people are active learners who are now responsible for doing this. And, you know, you make or break this course based on how much you engage this. I'm here for any question you have, anything you need. I'm super well resourced. I have all this background. I know exactly how to answer your questions, but like, you've got to kind of get to the point where you have the right questions. And I find it a much more satisfying way to teach too, because then they're coming to you like, oh, I've like encountered this, I don't know what to do now. You know, like I got this far, but I don't know this about the field, or I don't know what tool to use. And then you're able to give them information that's really relevant to their issue, rather than attempting what is always kind of the impossible, which is to give somebody like a really broad sense of the entire field and everything that they might encounter. Like, nobody can hear all that and process all that, but they can really process when they've come to a point where they really need some information, and they go to you, and then they're always going to remember that because they got to the point where they had the question themselves.
I love that. I'm planning next week. I have it tomorrow and it's going to be different, but I'm planning next week's.
Ooh. Oh, God, I got some good Brooklyn noise there.
Yeah.
Good, because I'm kind of missing Brooklyn. What was the last thing I was going to say? Yeah, and if you take this on, you might say like, you know, we're midpoint in the semester. It'll be perfect, actually. It's almost mid-October. We've got the rest of this course is really going to revolve around this final project, and that will be a good like energy pick me up too, because otherwise the energy can kind of fall around that time where holidays are going to start coming, people are tired, the days are getting shorter. So if you can infuse it with some sense of purpose.
I think so, yeah. And I think also I'm getting a little bit bored of the structure too. I think it's good, but I do think it's a long time to have the same structure every class.
Totally. I'm curious, just like and you don't, and not that you should have it figured out yet, but like what comes to mind as like a final project is just as you begin to brainstorm, what do you think could teach them some of the skills that you hope they get over the course of the semester?
Well, one thing that I've had them work on is I give them a brief for a project.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that I'm a client, they're the agency. So having them work on a whole concept to building, like, what's the final project look like
Right.
the final pitch.
Right.
And so I think breaking down each week, like maybe the last remaining weeks on, this is like, we've done the brief, but the various aspects to a campaign and having them build that to the end.
Right.
And that's kind of what it was in the beginning, thinking of like, that's the final project, but getting to that point is definitely tougher with not in person and 3 hours.
Oh yeah, it's really tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. So in essence, you're kind of taking this off you and putting it on them, which is not lazy, it's effective, because you're like, yeah. The last thing that occurs to me is when you said vocabulary, my ears kind of perked up, because I've noticed this happens in a lot of content areas where if you took a course in education, when I first started studying education, or when I first started when I worked for my first tech company, there were like all of these like actual words and terms that maybe were familiar in other contexts, but not in this context. And clearly they meant something different than I was used to. And I remember, sitting at Amplify, writing down just words in my notebook and feeling like I had to go figure out like what they meant, because I hadn't completely understood the meaning. Like I'd gotten the main idea, but then there was this other, and I didn't want to pipe up and say like, what's a wireframe? Like I know the word wire and I know the word frame, but I actually don't know what you're talking about. And so it can be kind of cool, like to support the project-based learning. I mean, the project-based learning is this design-oriented creative activity that's really like proactive on the learner's part. But when you're presenting your own little section at the beginning, which is a lecture, a broad overview, you can make, in a kind of fun way, like a vocabulary section where you're going to say, these are 5 terms that, like, if you got hired in a digital agency, or if you're working with a digital agency, you're likely to hear. And let's guess what they mean. You can do mind maps, like put one in the middle and say what words are associated with it. What do you think it might mean? Try to use it in a sentence. Take 5 guesses of what it might mean, what it might not mean. And that's a good like interactive sort of way to have people discuss, because it's simple, it's low stakes. People don't feel stupid because they're not even, how would they know what these mean? They've never like worked in a digital agency. Yeah. And the conversation around them makes it a little easier to actually remember what you taught in the end. And then you can take those words and say, like pick the ones that this would work for, but say these should like either be in your proposal or they should be when you present about your proposal. Try to use them, like just try to get them, have said them in front of people, or have written them by the end of this course. And you can even like remember when you're grading to like try to check them off when you see them or something, because it really does make you seem more professional when you know the vocabulary. Whether or not you know the stuff better or not, it makes it, people trust you more when you know the right words.
Right. Oh, absolutely. That's a great idea. I'm going to do it.
You're going to be really good at that. Yeah. I like it sounds really fun to have you lead that discussion. I should say that Crissy ended up naming my child because she's so good with language.
It was a good brainstorm over pasta.
Yeah, exactly. Eggplant. For me, pasta for you.
Right.
So that's kind of what I have. And I don't know. I mean, if you have any final questions, I'd be happy to answer, or you can just sit with this and run with it.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I do think changing the structure of the classes is helpful on both parts. And I'm going to really look at that, incorporating a little bit of what I have, because I do think showing them creative every week and different ads and different campaigns is helpful, but then also getting them to be the ones that are doing the creative is where I want them to be.
Right. It'll be fun to see what they create too.
Yeah, I'll have to share.
Are they like 20 years old? I mean, are they undergrads or are they?
Yeah, they're undergrads, but the age range varies. It's pretty great because the students range from teens to like their 30s.
Oh, neat.
It's very open, which I really love, because you have so many different skill sets and just backstories and all of that.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, and
What's
I'm
the
trying
department?
to emerging technology.
Okay. Wow. Sounds such a great opportunity.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so happy to be doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're lucky to have you.
Thank you. I'm lucky to have you, Leah.
I'm lucky to have you. Thank you so much for doing this. Crissy Spivey, Daughters Collective. Fantastic, creative, brilliant, fun person who everybody should have the chance to work with.
Oh, same for you. You know I love you. You're brilliant. And you're
I love you.
awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, bye.
Bye.